Hello, my name is Cindy Reed, and I started out my professional life actually as a nurse. In school, I fell in love with neurology and wanted to be a neurology nurse. However, when I got out of school, there was one nursing job in the hospital I wanted to work with, and that was in psychiatry. And I fell in love with psychiatry and spent the next 25 years of my career in that field. After I was divorced in my mid-40s, I decided to go back to school and study something that captured my heart. And I had some success personally with intention on my own, just from what was out there in the popular literature. However, I wanted to know how that worked and how I could make it work consistently. And could I make it work to help other people? Because what I was seeing in the hospitals wasn't a long-term solution to depression, anxiety, psychosis, none of that. And so I really wanted to find something that could help on a large scale. So that was where I started when I went back to graduate school.
Thank you, Cindy. And your 2003 to 2005 study explores the use of Dr. Tiller's intention broadcast technology in reducing symptoms of depression and anxiety. Now, you were the first to use this approach in your study. What inspired you to reach out to Dr. Tiller, and how did you do that?
Well, when I didn't know of Dr. Tiller when I landed at graduate school again, and Norm Shealy actually said, you need to meet Bill Tiller. And so I did some reading up on him and thought his broadcast intention device would be perfect for my study. Of course, he had only used the intention device with fruit flies, with water, and with enzymatic reactions. And so I couldn't find anywhere where he'd used it with people yet. And I thought, well, this may be a hill to climb. But being a nurse taught me how to be persistent to achieve a goal. And so Norm Shealy actually introduced me to Dr. Tiller in 2003. Dr. Tiller was visiting my school and gave a lecture, and had to travel about 3 hours to another city. And Norm arranged for me to travel with him. Although I wasn't aware that it was unbeknownst to Dr. Tiller. And he looked, when I jumped in the back of the van with him as he was leaving the school, he looked very surprised. And I had about 3 hours to convince him to try his methodology with people. And at first he didn't really want to do it. He kept telling me I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do this. But again, as a nurse, I learned persistence. And by the time we arrived in Springfield 3 hours later, he had agreed to help me and to do a study for depression and anxiety for my dissertation. And so we were off and running then.
That's great, Cindy. What led you to choose Dr. Tiller's intention host device, the IHD, over more conventional approaches to emotional well-being, like medical interventions in this study?
You know, I had watched medical interventions and cognitive and behavioral interventions for about 25 years. And so I knew the impact that they had in general. I knew the side effects. I knew the recidivism rate, the failure rate for these therapies. And it was so sad to me to see people struggle and come back over and over again. And really, I felt at that time, medicine didn't really have much to offer. If a medicine fails, there's nowhere to go. If a therapy fails, what do you do then? I mean, it was really heartbreaking to watch people go through that. And I thought his intention host device was a very interesting thing to try because, for example, in cognitive behavioral therapy, the patient actually has to do things. And when people are depressed, they really don't have much energy. So it's hard to do things. And so I saw folks struggle with this over and over. But with the intention host device, the patient wouldn't have to do anything. They don't have to change anything. They don't have to go anyplace and talk to anybody. They don't have to do anything. So it was easy for them to participate, and there were no side effects. That's the other thing that disturbed me in conventional medicine was the side effects. And so some of which leave permanent changes to a person. And so I thought for those two reasons specifically, it would be very, very useful. And the third thing I thought, I daydream a lot. And I thought, you know, if I was, we have a joke in our house, if I was the queen of the universe, what would I do? And I had the opportunity with Dr. Tiller's intention to really participate in the structure of the words to make the changes that I felt in my heart would be more helpful to people. And so I did.
What inspired you to explore this intersection of intention, consciousness, and mental health?
Well, there's so much that we don't know about the body, the mind, our spirit, how it all interacts, how it all works. And I was very, very curious about that because I know we're not just three-dimensional people operating in time and space, but there are other aspects to it. I mean, I know that I can be at a beach in my head in a minute, less than a minute, and feel the warmth of the sand on my toes. Now, how do I do that sitting in a cold winter in Iowa? But I can. And so I was very curious. I didn't really understand it, but I was very, very curious about how all that worked and how I could influence that to work for myself and for other people.
Okay, for those unfamiliar with Dr. Tiller's technology, what exactly is the IHD, or the intention host device, and how did you use it in your study?
Well, he was a brilliant man. He figured out how, from a physics perspective, how this all works. How does our mind interface with our body, and how does our mind interface with our spirit? And he had formulas and processes for doing that. And he figured out how to build a small device that doesn't really do anything, and how to imprint consciousness or a thought in that device, and then have that device broadcast that, much like a magnetic wave goes out from a device, the intention that's imprinted goes out from the device. And it's fascinating because how does that know where to go? For a magnetic wave, there's often a locator, a place that it is directed to. And in my study, the locator in physics were people's names and addresses. And we later, not in this study, but later on in the Tiller Foundation, we added cell phone numbers, because people keep their cell phones with them most of the time. And so those numbers, those combinations of numbers and letters, acted in a physics manner as a locator for this wave of intention that was broadcast from the device. And the other thing that was different about this, different than any of the other studies, I had read studies where people had pastors sit and pray for people, or shamans intend for people, or different ways that people might try to have an impact with intention. But the flaw that I saw in that is that everyone has their own experience and their own filters and their own thoughts and their own judgments. And this little box had no judgments. It had no preconceived notion of how things should work or should be. And it worked 24 hours a day. It didn't depend on, are you tired? Have you eaten? Did you sleep? Didn't depend on any of that. It was just there broadcasting the same thing over and over and over and over. And so I thought, well, that's, if intention is going to be able to consistently make an impact with someone, you've got to have a consistent intention going out to them. I mean, we all know with exercise, you do it once and you're not done. You have to practice over and over and over to get a result. And I think the same thing happens with broadcast intention. You can't just do it for a day or a month. You have to do it over time. And I had a lot of questions about, well, how long does it take? How long would it take to make an impact with this sort of a device for somebody? Yeah. So those are all questions that we explored in the study.
How did you construct or phrase the intention for the IHD in this study? How did you do that?
Dr. Tiller was really the expert in that because he had structured successful intentions already with water, with fruit flies, and with enzymes, ATP. And so he had the basic structure. And the question to me was, what do you want? What's the goal? What do you want to achieve? And really, what I wanted to achieve was to reduce depression and anxiety, and then also reduce the stress that may be causing those, so that the person that was receiving this can function optimally at the physical, the mental, and the spiritual and the emotional levels, so that they're optimal functioning. So it was really two things: reduce the symptoms and function at the best level that they can, and actually according to their soul's purpose with this lifetime. I didn't want to override anybody's soul purpose. You know, that's not my my purview to do that. So the intention was like an offering to the person, and if everything lined up, then it works.
Right, right. I know you addressed this before. What role does the physical distance between the IHD and participants play according to the study?
You know, that was one of the most fascinating aspects to me, because we live in a world of time and distance. So you and I are miles and miles apart, and we met at a specific time. But in the physics world, where this wave operates, there is no time and no distance. So Dr. Tiller had done a variety of experiments where he had the intention host device right next to the thing he wanted to impact, and that worked really well. Probably the furthest experiment that he did was having an intention host device in Payson, Arizona, and having it impact a laboratory in Italy. So I think that was about 6,000 miles. So there was no distance. That wave operating on that frequency, so to speak, distance didn't really make a difference. So we had people in the study from Canada and Mexico and all over the United States. So that was really a joy to see.
Yeah, fascinating, really. Now, what were your main findings in the study?
Well, we did the study in two phases, and really we didn't know, Dr. Tiller didn't know, and I didn't know how long would this take. So we recruited about 180 some people, and we gave them broadcast intention for a month, because we wanted to see what kind of changes would happen. Of course, we were looking for statistical significance. And we had them take a Zoom depression test. It's a standard test used in psychology offices and psychiatrist offices. And we also had them take a state trait anxiety inventory. That's a test that determines what your level of state anxiety is. And state anxiety is something just happened and I'm really anxious. It also measures trait anxiety, which is I'm a nervous person. You've met people that are just sort of nervous people and nothing's happening. So it measures both of those things. I'm nervous because something happened. I'm anxious because I'm just generally anxious in general. So they had folks took those three tests before we turned the broadcast on, and then after the first 30 days, they took another test. And we didn't get statistical significance on any of the measures, but we were approaching statistical significance on the state anxiety measure. And that gave us encouragement to do a second phase. And the second phase was a 3-month phase and then an 8-month phase. And so we did those two phases. We had an intervention group and a control group. So folks didn't know if they were getting the broadcast or not. And they all took the same test and submitted their results. And all of that was done by mail. And so when we compiled everything, what we figured out is that things really start to change for folks at about the 3-month mark. And so that was good information to have. But the maximum change seems to come at about 8 to 11 months for people. And we did achieve statistical significance in all 3 measures, which was quite amazing because, you know, it was very interesting that it happened with depression, because for some people, depression is just a terrible burden that they bear throughout their lives. And this could make a difference in that. But also in anxiety, and in trait anxiety. So people that are nervous people in general, this made a difference for those folks. And there's hardly anything in the psychological world except heavy medication that makes much of a difference for people with generalized anxiety. So that was really a significant finding. But we did achieve significance for all those folks. And then, of course, to the control group, they all got the broadcast afterwards, so that they didn't get left out.
What deeper opportunities does this study raise about consciousness and intention and healing and well-being in general?
Well, you know, I was so excited for these results. I was so excited. Finally, we had some scientific double-blind proof that something else could help people with depression and anxiety. And I was so excited when I got done. I shared my study with everyone that I knew and could talk to. And the interesting thing was that the reaction of the medical world to that was, I don't really believe it. I don't really believe it. If it's not a medication, if it's not a therapy. And what I figured out is that this type of intervention isn't, this is going to sound odd, but isn't highly monetizable. So you're not going to make a lot of money off of this kind of an intervention. And so the insurance companies aren't interested in it. The hospitals aren't interested in it. And I couldn't find anybody that would be interested in trying this to make their patients better. And I don't fault the people. I fault the system. The system really is structured so that novel interventions like this don't have a chance unless somebody makes a lot of money off of them. And so that's kind of where it was at.
Right, right. Yeah, you spoke that in the white paper you wrote that's published in on the Tiller website, which is, I believe, white paper number 16. And you spoke about intertransformation worldviews. Can you say anything more about that in light of what you were just talking about?
Well, I think this technology has the potential to transform a lot. And I think really, you know, the other interesting thing is that we tried to get published, and this was in 2005 and 6 and 7 and even 8. And we could not get published even in any of the alternative medicine journals. We took another run at it in about 2018 or 19, and we did end up getting published, which is good. So there was more, that said to me, there's more openness to these kinds of novel interventions. And I think really the people working in the system are all good people and they want to help their patients. And I think between 2005 and 2018 or 19, I think folks saw the futility more of the current standard medical interventions, the people working in the system, not the system structures. Structures are very geared toward other things. And so I think there's more openness to this now. And actually, that caused us at the Tiller Foundation to construct 3 intentions for folks based on this research and some other research. And we have a intention for emotional well-being, for physical well-being, and then for financial abundance. And so we have intentions that you can actually go and purchase. You don't need a prescription. You don't need a doctor or a therapist. You can just go purchase these yourself. and start to receive the benefit. And we encourage people, because of those research results, we encourage people to stay on the broadcast for at least a year, because everybody's different and it will affect folks differently. And so
Right.
it needs time. It needs some time.
And isn't there an autism broadcast as well that's available to people?
Yes, at the Tiller Foundation, the other major research study we did was with autism, and it was a fascinating study because there are so many different symptoms and such a spectrum of dysfunction for autism. Some people are very mildly dysfunctional, and some kids and adults are very, very dysfunctional. And so we had a little bit different view of autism at the Tiller Foundation. We had a view that it wasn't a chemical imbalance or a toxicity or we didn't focus on chemical imbalance, toxicity, genetics, vaccines, any of the things that you usually hear about as causes of autism. We thought that the mismatch in autism was between the emotional body and the physical body and the spiritual body. So what we intended for these kids was coherence, so that the messages could get through between their mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. Because most of the time in autism, one of the ways that it shows up is with difficulty communicating, which led us to believe that there's some sort of mismatch energetically going on between their physical bodies, their emotional bodies, and their mental or spiritual bodies. And so we intended for coherence between all of those. And what we ended up with was statistically significant results again. And so we're hoping, we're just about to embark on a repeat of that study to see if we can repeat the results that we got the first time. So that's in the regular medical world, that's how you usually validate your results. As you run your study, you get great results, and then you run it again at a different point in time, same conditions, and to see if you get the same results. So that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I that Dr. Tiller's overall intention is to help this world become a better place, and all the humans within it to be happier and more fulfilled.
I'm hoping in my lifetime I get to see it integrate. You know, at this moment in time, we're being overwhelmed with the number of people with autism. I think we're down to 1 in 36 kids born now have autism, which is astounding, actually. And especially after COVID, the prevalence of mental health issues and social issues with young people, with old people, with all people are just staggering. And so, and while we don't completely understand the technology and how this works in the physics world, we need more research to validate that. We know that it works. And most people I talk to that are suffering in this world, they're not really, it's like your cell phone. Can you tell me exactly how your cell phone works? Probably not.
No.
No, but you know it works and you know how to use it. And so most people I talk to that are suffering, they just want something that's going to work, and they want to feel better, and they want to have a better life.
Right. And your study suggests that consciousness and intention may be operational forces in healing. Now, looking forward, how do you see this work evolving?
Well, again, we're hoping to do an autism study, a repeat of the autism study, which I think at this moment in time, given the increases that we've seen in autism the last few years, could be very helpful to the population. And, you know, it's interesting, the sky's the limit in terms of this technology. All we need to do is have people and their ideas, and we could do a lot of different things with this. So far, everything that we've tried has made a difference. So we've done a number of studies. Dr. Tiller did a number of studies before I met him that validated that it works on inanimate objects like water, small living objects like fruit flies, and now we have evidence that it works on people. We haven't done anything with other animals yet, but we could. But there's a whole host of applications. One that I would like to try personally, because it's just ramping up with all the explosion of AI and data centers and the incredible heat and electricity consumption of those places. I would love to try an intention to decrease those two things, because they're problematic and they have to have huge systems to control for those things so that the machines work. So I think that would be a great experiment to try to see if we reduce the electricity usage and the cooling usage in a large data center. So far, we haven't found anything that it won't work on.
Right, and I believe Dr. did some studies with that very past, with reducing his home energy bills.
Yeah.
And he had some success with that. In fact, good success with that.
He did.
Using his intention technology. What would you say to someone struggling with anxiety or depression, curious about this interest, intention for their journey?
You know, the Tiller Foundation does a couple things. There's a general emotional health broadcast available to anybody. You just have to sign up. It's like it's a recurring charge to your credit card, and it really isn't any more costly than your cell phone bill. So it's not thousands of dollars to do this. So that's one thing. Also, we have it for physical. And I would recommend that somebody, if you have depression, you do both of those broadcasts, because they contain different elements. Of course, physical health has very different elements than the mental health. And if you're interested in seeing what those intentions are, you can write to us and we will send them to you. So you could see exactly what the broadcast would contain and if that fits for your situation. I would also recommend the abundance broadcast, because I've had some amazing success with that one just myself. And so I love that broadcast. And so you can sign up for those on the Tiller website. Those are available now. However, if you have some resources to dedicate to this, the Tiller Foundation will construct an intention specifically for you. You would work with a small group of us and we would figure out exactly what you wanted to change about your circumstances or your life or yourself. And then we would help write an intention. You would have the final approval of it. And that's what we would broadcast to you for a year. So, but that's much more pricey than just signing up for the general emotional or physical broadcasts.
All right.
You can also sign up I would encourage everyone to sign up for, if you have an autistic child or even an autistic adult child, to sign up for the autism broadcast. And so I'll just tell you a little bit of personal experience here. I have one son and he was diagnosed with adult autism at age 34, and he'd had some communication issues and some emotional issues. And he got this diagnosis and we got him on the broadcast, and he's a different kid now. And I love it. I love it. As a mother, there is nothing better than seeing your child improve and achieve success. There's just nothing better.
Oh, that just sounds so wonderful. That's so wonderful. And it's an easy thing to do. There's nothing that your son really do except sit back and receive the podcast.
That's right.
And Dr. Tiller did the study many years ago on the children and the parents of the autistic children. And he did write papers, which are freely available to download on the Tiller Foundation website. And go to white papers. There's for 30, 35 different white papers, and as well some of his old publications and writings that have never been published on the website. So if you want to dig deeper, that's a place to. The great resource is the Tiller Foundation website, tillerfoundation.org.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.